If you have to shrink yourself to be loved, it's not love. It's abandonment disguised as affection. And the person abandoning you is you. I once dated someone who made me feel like I was always just too much, too loud when I laughed, too opinionated when I spoke, too ambitious for their comfort. I remember walking into a restaurant with him one night, and before we even sat down, he leaned in and whispered, "Can you tone it down a little tonight?" And I did. I shrank. Bit by bit, I became smaller. I started second-guessing every sentence I spoke. I'd rehearse texts before sending them. I'd replay conversations in my head, wondering if I had overstepped, overshared, overfeeled. I thought I was being considerate. I thought I was being a good partner. But what I was really doing was slowly erasing myself. The saddest part? I believed that was love. That if someone stayed, even conditionally, even distantly, it meant I mattered. I confused presence with care and compromise with worth. I convinced myself that if I could just adjust enough, make myself quieter, gentler, easier to love, then maybe I wouldn't be left again. This is the quiet agony so many people live through in dating. We trade pieces of ourselves for a seat at a table we don't even want to be at. We walk on eggshells and call it grace. We silence ourselves and call it maturity. We apologize for who we are because somewhere deep down, we've learned that who we are might be too much to love. And this doesn't come out of nowhere. Psychology calls it fawning, a trauma response where we appease and self-abandon to avoid rejection or conflict. It's a survival strategy. Somewhere along the way, we picked up the message that love is earned by being easy, agreeable, convenient. So we become versions of ourselves we don't even recognize, all so someone won't leave. But here's the soul-crushing truth. If someone only stays when you're edited, they were never there for the real you. They were there for the character you created. And the longer you play that role, the more painful it becomes to wake up every day and feel like you're not enough. Not because you aren't, but because you've stopped showing up as yourself. The healing begins when we notice how often we say, "I'm sorry," for things that don't require apology. I'm sorry I cried. I'm sorry I needed a moment. I'm sorry I said what I felt. No. No more. You are not an inconvenience. You are not too much. You are a whole person, worthy of showing up fully. And the moment you begin to believe that, to act like it, to love yourself with the kind of fierceness you've given others, that's when dating changes. That's when you change. Because love that costs your identity is not love. It's abandonment disguised as affection. And the person abandoning you is you. But here's the good news. You can come back to yourself. You can stop apologizing for your existence. You can reclaim the parts you hid to survive. And when you do, you don't just find love. You find liberation. A close friend once sat across from me in tears after another heartbreak and whispered something that shook me to my core. She said, "I don't think I know what love is outside of earning it." Her voice cracked on the word earning, like it physically hurt her to admit it out loud. And it did, because that kind of truth doesn't just come from one failed relationship. It comes from a lifetime of learning that love is something you have to work for. It was like she had just exposed this invisible blueprint so many of us are following, even without realizing it. We chase love the way we once chased approval, from emotionally inconsistent parents, from teachers who only saw us when we performed, from caregivers who withheld affection when we didn't measure up. And we carry that blueprint with us into adulthood, into dating, into relationships that keep us stuck in cycles of proving ourselves over and over again. We fall for people who don't see us because they remind us of the people We needed to see us but didn't. We confuse the anxiety of emotional inconsistency with chemistry. We mistake the high of winning someone over with the feeling of being loved. This isn't just emotional, it's neurological. In attachment theory, there's something called anxious attachment, which is deeply rooted in how our early caregivers responded or didn't respond to our emotional needs. If love in our childhood was unpredictable, conditional, or absent, we learned to stay hyper-attuned to others and completely disconnected from ourselves. We developed a belief system that said, I have to be good enough to be loved. I have to earn love through perfection, performance, or pleasing. So in dating, we hustle. We oversaturate. We explain ourselves constantly. We tolerate mistreatment because deep down, we're still waiting for someone to finally choose us, to finally say, you're enough as you are. But here's the brutal reality. No amount of love from someone else can heal the wound of feeling unworthy. That's your work. That's your homecoming. And healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like finally saying no to the person who only reaches out when it's convenient. Not being able to say no so that you can say yes to the person who only reaches out when it's convenient. Sometimes it's choosing not to text back. Sometimes it's the quiet, painful courage of staying single, not because you're unlovable, but because you're no longer willing to abandon yourself just to avoid being alone. And I know this is hard. I know this feels like standing naked in the middle of a storm. But here's what healing teaches us. Just because someone failed to love you the way you needed, doesn't mean you are unlovable. It means they were limited. It means they were wounded. It means they were doing their best from their own brokenness. But you have the power to do it differently. You can rewrite the story. You can stop the echo. You can create a new rhythm of love that doesn't sound like survival. And it starts with this one truth. You were never meant to earn love. You were meant to receive it. Without performing, without proving, without pain. You are allowed to be loved in your rest, in your silence, in your stillness. You are allowed to be loved when you aren't fixing or saving or serving. You are allowed to be loved simply because you are. And the moment you realize that, you stop chasing love that costs you everything and start chasing love that holds you exactly as you are. There was a night I'll never forget. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, crying so hard I couldn't even see the steering wheel. The breakup had happened 3 weeks earlier, but the pain hit me like a fresh wound that night. Not because he left, but because somewhere deep in my bones, I realized I had left myself long before he ever walked away. I wasn't crying over him. I was mourning me. The version of me I had silenced, the needs I had ignored, the boundaries I had betrayed. I had contorted myself into someone I didn't recognize just to keep that relationship alive. I said yes when I wanted to scream no. I stayed quiet when something hurt. I smiled through disappointment. I was more afraid of being alone than I was of disappearing inside a love that slowly erased me. And that's when it hit me. Loneliness isn't the enemy. Self-abandonment is. We're told that loneliness is the worst thing to feel, especially in a world obsessed with connection, romance, and togetherness. We swipe through apps, scroll through highlight reels, convinced that if we're not partnered, if we're not chosen, then we're somehow failing at life. But I've come to learn that being alone is not the same as being lonely. You can have an empty room and still feel full. And you can be lying next to someone every night and feel hollow, invisible, utterly disconnected. And yet, we stay in those hollow places because our nervous system is wired to crave attachment, even unhealthy ones. Behavioral psychology calls it trauma bonding, where we become addicted to the highs and lows of emotionally inconsistent relationships. It mimics the chaos many of us grew up with. It feels familiar, so we think it's love. So we cling. We convince ourselves that something is better than nothing. We silence our needs so we won't be left. We twist ourselves into shapes to avoid the sting of solitude. But the real sting isn't in solitude. It's in the daily rejection of who we are to keep someone else comfortable. Self-abandonment is when you feel a boundary rise inside of you and you ignore. It's when your gut says, this isn't right, and you talk yourself out of listening. It's when you choose peace externally at the cost of chaos internally. And here's the hard truth no one tells you. Love doesn't feel like anxiety. It doesn't feel like guessing. It doesn't feel like negotiating your worth just to stay in the room. The moment everything changed for me was the moment I sat in that car and whispered through tears, I'm here, I'm not leaving you again. I was talking to myself. And I meant it. That night, I chose me. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but out of return. A return to self. A return to the girl who always knew her worth, but kept handing it to people who didn't know how to hold it. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's deleting a number and grieving the fantasy. Sometimes it's looking in the mirror and seeing your own reflection as worthy company. Because here's what I know now. Being alone is far less painful than being with someone who makes you feel lonely in their presence. And when you finally stop abandoning yourself for the illusion of connection, you don't just survive your solitude, you honor it. You begin to realize that loneliness is not the absence of people, it's the absence of self. And the greatest love story you'll ever live is the one where you come home to the parts of you once deserted, and this time you stay. Because many of us have been taught, directly or indirectly, that love is something we have to curate ourselves for. We've learned to keep parts of ourselves tucked away. We become masters at reading the room, sensing what someone wants, and morphing into that. We become easy to be around, agreeable, desirable. We keep the tears inside. We minimize our needs. We edit ourselves down to bite-sized, manageable pieces, just enough to be lovable, but not so much that we become a burden. The source of our pain is not sometimes our sexual source, and not so much as but here's the problem. You cannot be truly loved until you are truly seen. And you can't be seen if you're hiding behind a version of yourself that isn't real. I remember a relationship I had where I played the role so well, I even started to believe it myself. I was the cool girl, laid back, undemanding, always smiling, always accommodating. I acted like I didn't care when he forgot things that mattered to me. I pretended my needs weren't urgent. I acted like silence didn't bother me. And the whole time, a voice inside me was screaming, but what about me? That voice gets quieter the longer you ignore it. But it never disappears. We do this because we're terrified that if we show up in our full emotional range, if we express our real needs, if we reveal our fears, our anger, our softness, our complexity, we will be too much. That we will be abandoned, rejected, or worse, shamed. From a psychological standpoint, this fear makes sense. Many of us experienced conditional love growing up. We were praised when we behaved and ignored or punished when we didn't. We learned to perform for approval. And now, as adults, we're still performing, but this time the audience is someone we desperately want to love us. But real love, the kind that sees you in the light and the dark, the kind that stays when things get messy, requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is scary because it means handing someone a map of your heart and trusting they won't burn it. But it's also the only way to be truly loved. Because if someone says they love you and you've only shown them 60% of who you are, then the love they feel is for 60% of a performance, not you, not fully. The saddest part of hiding is that even when love comes your way, it doesn't reach you. It hits the mask, the curated version. And you go to bed at night wondering why you still feel unseen, why the ache in your chest hasn't left, even though you're loved. The truth is, we don't just want to be loved. We want to be known. We want someone to look at us in our rawness, in our complexity, and say, I see you, and I still choose you. But that can only happen when we stop pretending, when we stop shrinking, when we choose to show up as we really are, even if our voice shakes, even if it costs us temporary comfort. And listen, I'm not saying it's easy. Vulnerability is one of the most courageous things you'll ever do. It means risking rejection. It means being misunderstood. It means standing in your truth even when your legs are trembling. But here's what I know from both personal experience and what the research tells us. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, connection, belonging. It's not weakness. It's the most honest form of strength. So if you're dating and you're finding yourself exhausted all the time, feeling unseen, unloved, unchosen, it may not be because you're unworthy. It may be because you've hidden the very parts of you that are most lovable. You deserve a love that sees you in your fullness. Not just the smiles, but the scars. Not just the calm, but the chaos. Not just the strength, but the softness. And the first step toward that love is letting you see you, all of you, without apology. Because when you finally drop the mask and stand in the light of your own truth, you don't just invite love in. You finally become available to receive it. The most powerful shift in my entire life didn't come from falling in love with someone new. It came the day I finally fell in love with me. Not in the cute Instagram mask, treat yourself kind of way. Not in bubble baths or new journals or whispered affirmations over coffee, but in the raw, brutal, soul-wrenching kind of way, where I sat alone on the floor with my back against the wall and said, I'm done abandoning you. I'm done waiting to be chosen. I choose you now. It didn't come after a triumph. It came after a series of relational disappointments that left me feeling hollow. And here's what I realized. I had spent most of my adult life waiting for someone to give me the thing I had never learned to give myself. Safety, acceptance, consistency, and deep, unconditional love. I had kept looking out there, hoping that the next partner would finally fill the void, would finally see me and make it all okay. But no matter how good the romance started, I always ended up circling the same question in the quiet. Why do I still feel like I'm not enough? And then it hit me. I was outsourcing the love I was starving for, hoping someone else would come along and treat me better than I treated myself. The truth? I couldn't receive love because I didn't yet believe I deserved it. I didn't trust it. I didn't even recognize it when it was real because I hadn't practiced giving it to myself first. Every compliment felt suspicious. Every act of care felt temporary. Every moment of affection felt like a setup for future pain. It's not that I didn't want to be loved. It's that I didn't know how to sit with love that wasn't earned through effort, performance, or pain. In trauma healing, there's a concept called earned secure attachment. It means that even if you didn't grow up in a home where love was safe or consistent, you can rebuild that safety inside yourself. You can rewire what love means, and it starts with you. For me, it began in the most ordinary moments. Learning to stop talking to myself like a critic. Learning to rest without guilt. learning to listen to the ache in my chest instead of shaming it, learning to say, I'm proud of you when no one else did, learning to hold my own heart when it was shattered, without rushing to fix it or handing it off to someone else to carry. And slowly, something began to shift. I stopped reaching out to people who made me question my value. I stopped settling for being tolerated. I stopped clinging to relationships where I had to beg to be understood. And I started coming home to me. That's when dating changed. Because I no longer approached love from desperation. I approached it from wholeness. I was no longer hoping someone would complete me. I was looking for someone who would walk beside me, someone who saw the beauty I already held. And here's what's wild. The moment I started treating myself like I mattered, the people who didn't treat me that way fell away naturally. No drama, no begging, just release. Because when your standard for love rises, your tolerance for self-abandonment drops to zero. You don't have to chase anymore. You attract what aligns with your self-worth. There's this quote I come back to over and over. You don't find your worth in someone else's hands. You remember it in your own. That's what self-love is. It's not arrogance. It's not about being alone forever. It's about finally realizing that you don't have to perform to be loved. You don't have to prove your value. You don't have to prove your self-value. You don't have to prove your value. You already are valuable. You already are worthy. You already are enough. And when you live like that's true, even when it's hard, even when the world tells you otherwise, you become a magnet for love that's real, love that sees you, love that stays, love that feels like coming home, not like survival. But even if that love hasn't arrived yet, know this: you are already living the greatest love story of your life. The one where you stop chasing people and start choosing yourself. And that, my friend, is the day you become the love you've been seeking all along. If you're out there wondering if you're too much or not enough, if you're waiting for someone to pick you, to see you, to stay, let me say this. You are not hard to love. You are not broken. You are not a burden. You are learning how to hold your own hand. And that, my friend, is the beginning of everything.